Hey everyone, good to see you. So, let me ask you something. Have you noticed the price of everyday things creeping up again? Maybe it's your groceries, electronics, or even that new car you had your eye on. Well, there's a reason that might start hitting even harder, and it has to do with something called reciprocal tariffs. President Trump just announced a new set of tariffs that could reshape how we buy and sell goods across borders. And honestly, it's one of the biggest shifts in trade policy we've seen in decades. What's interesting is that while this move is being framed as a way to protect American jobs and level the playing field, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that could impact everything from what we pay at the store to how secure our own jobs feel. So if you've ever wondered how global trade decisions can hit close to home, or why things you buy are suddenly 20% more expensive, this is one of those moments where understanding the why really matters. Stick with me today because we're going to walk through what these tariffs are, what reciprocal tariffs even mean, and how it could affect your wallet, your job, and honestly, the whole economy. And hey, if you find topics like this helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know, and I'd love to have you here for future conversations like this. So let's start with the basics. A tariff is essentially a tax that a government places on goods coming into the country. When you hear that a 25% tariff is placed on cars from another country, that means every car imported from there suddenly costs 25% more before it even hits the lot. Now, what makes reciprocal tariffs different is that the US is now saying, if you're going to tax our products at 20%, we're going to do the same to yours. It's a tit-for-tat approach, simple in theory, but in practice, it's a lot more complicated. So, President Trump's argument is rooted in fairness. If countries like India, China, or Brazil put high taxes on American products, then the US should match them. Sounds reasonable, right? Especially if you're in a part of the country that's seen factories close down or jobs move overseas. It gives the feeling that someone's finally standing up for you. But let's pause for a second and think about what this actually means. If we match every country's tariffs, that could mean higher taxes on nearly everything we import. Electronics, clothes, food, cars, tools, you name it. And we import a lot. In fact, last year alone, we brought in about $3.3 trillion worth of goods. That's a huge amount of stuff that could now get hit with new taxes. So then, who pays for that? Well, that's where things get personal. Businesses will try to pass those costs on to consumers, which means you. Prices go up. Your paycheck buys less. And for companies that rely on global supply chains, that can mean tough decisions about layoffs, hiring freezes, or even closing down. Also, there's this idea floating around that tariffs will somehow shrink our trade deficit. That's the gap between how much we import versus how much we export. Trump's team says this deficit means other countries are taking advantage of us. But here's the thing. Most economists don't see it that way. The trade deficit is tied more to how much Americans spend versus save and how much the government borrows. In other words, unless we start saving more and spending less as a country, the trade deficit won't just disappear because of tariffs. You see, the problem isn't just that we buy more than we sell. It's that our entire economy is built around consumption. Americans like to buy a lot, and our government runs a lot of programs without always collecting enough taxes to pay for them. So we borrow. That money comes from somewhere, often overseas. All of this creates a natural trade imbalance that tariffs alone can't fix. Still, let's say we go forward with these reciprocal tariffs. What happens next? One possibility is that other countries fight back. They could slap new tariffs on American goods in return. That's called retaliation, and it's not just a theory. It's happened before. Remember the soybean farmers a few years ago? When Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, China hit back by cutting US agricultural imports. Farmers lost major markets and needed billions in government subsidies just to stay afloat. Now, imagine that, but bigger. Right now, Trump is talking about matching tariffs with nearly every country. That means more retaliation, more instability, and more sectors feeling the heat. Another thing to consider is how this affects businesses that rely on imported parts. A lot of what's made in America is actually assembled here using parts from all over the world. Cars, electronics, even your phone. Many of these products involve components made in different countries. So when tariffs go up, the whole supply chain gets more expensive. And next, there's the job market. Moody's Analytics, which is a respected research firm, says that if these tariffs go into full effect and countries retaliate, we could lose around 5.5 million jobs. Unemployment could rise above 7%. That's a lot of people potentially out of work or struggling to find steady hours. Now, let's be fair. Some people believe the pain is worth it. That short-term hardship could lead to long-term strength, bringing manufacturing back home and forcing other countries to negotiate fair deals. That's what Trump and his supporters are hoping for. But others argue the long-term benefits are overstated. They say the global economy is more interconnected than ever, and trying to isolate ourselves just makes everything more expensive without solving the root issues. Speaking of which, something a lot of people have been asking is, how are these tariffs actually going to work? Are we matching each product one by one? Are we setting a flat rate for each country? Are there exceptions? What about items we don't even produce here anymore? These are big questions, and right now, the answers aren't totally clear. Even within the Trump administration, there's disagreement. Some officials want to focus on just a few countries that run big trade surpluses with us. Others want to apply the tariffs universally. There's even talk of using the money from the tariffs, which could be in the trillions over time, to fund tax rebates or even send checks directly to Americans. That sounds appealing, right? But economists warn that by the time you account for the higher prices and the potential job losses, the math may not work out in our favor. Besides, this whole approach breaks from how global trade has worked for the last 75 years. Since World War II, countries have tried to work together to lower tariffs and keep things predictable. Agreements through groups like the World Trade Organization made sure that countries couldn't just raise tariffs on a whim. Trump's reciprocal tariff policy changes that. It sends a signal that the US might go it alone. Now, for some people, that sounds strong, like taking back control. But to others, it's a risky move that could isolate the US and make it harder to resolve trade disputes through diplomacy. Also, it's worth mentioning something called VAT, value-added tax. Many countries have this tax, and it applies to all goods, not just imports. Trump argues that this hurts American exports, but economists mostly agree that VATs aren't a trade barrier. They're just how those countries handle taxes internally. Still, the administration sees it as another piece of the puzzle that makes trade unfair. So what does this all mean for you? Well, if you're someone who shops for groceries, fills up your car, buys electronics, or runs a small business, you're going to feel it. Prices will likely rise, especially on items we don't produce domestically. If you work in an industry that exports products, especially to Europe or Asia, your job could be affected if those countries retaliate. If you're invested in the stock market, you may have already seen some of the volatility from these announcements. And then there's just the uncertainty. When businesses don't know what trade rules will look like in a month or a year, they delay investments. They cut back. They plan for the worst. That uncertainty trickles down. It makes everything feel less stable. Now, I'm not here to tell you which side of this is right or wrong. There are good faith arguments on both ends. Some people believe this is a bold move to fix long-standing problems. Others worry it's a risky step that could hurt more than help. What I can tell you is this: reciprocal tariffs might sound simple, but they come with ripple effects. They touch nearly every part of our economy. And when policies start shifting this dramatically, it's important to stay informed, ask questions, and pay attention to how it impacts your own life. So then, what can you do? Keep an eye on your expenses. Pay attention to which products are rising in price. If you're a small business owner, now's a good time to review your suppliers and see how exposed you are to imports. And most importantly, keep learning. Because these economic shifts aren't just headlines. They shape the environment we all live and work in. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. Let me know in the comments what you're seeing in your area. Are prices rising? Are businesses talking about trade? I read all the comments and really appreciate hearing your perspectives. And if you found this helpful, consider giving the video a like and subscribing. That way, you won't miss the next conversation we have here. Stay thoughtful, stay informed, and I'll catch you in the next one.